right. Recording Genesis 27.
This would be about Jacob stealing Esau's blessing. One day when, did you want 3 verses or 5?
Five, please. Five,
Five,
please.
please. Okay. One day when Isaac was old and turning blind, he called for Esau, his older son, and said, "My son." "Yes, father," Esau replied. "I am an old man now," Isaac said, "and I don't know when I will die. Take your bow and your quiver full of arrows and go out into the open country to hunt some wild game for me. Prepare some favorite dish and bring it here to me to eat. Then I will pronounce the blessing that belongs to you, my firstborn son, before I die." But Rebekah overheard that Isaac had said to his son Esau. So when Esau left to hunt for the wild game,
she said to her son Jacob, "Listen, I overheard your father say to Esau, 'Bring me some wild game and prepare me a delicious meal. Then I will bless you in the Lord's presence before I die. Now, my son, listen to me. Do exactly as I tell you. Go out to the flocks and bring me 2 fine young goats. I'll use them to prepare your father's favorite dish. Then take the food to your father so he can eat it and bless you before he dies.'"
All right. The Michaels.
We're on 11, Fred. Where are you at?
Oh, sorry. But look, Jacob replied to Rebekah, "My brother Esau is a hairy man and my skin is smooth. What if my father touches me? He'll see that I'm trying to trick him, and then he'll curse me instead of blessing me." But his mother replied, "Then let the curse fall on me, my son. Just do what I tell you. Get out and get the goats for me." So Jacob went out and got the young goats for his mother. Rebekah took them and prepared a delicious meal just the way Isaac liked it. Then he took Esau's favorite clothes, which were there in the house, and gave them to her younger son, Jacob.
She covered his arms and the smooth part of his neck with the skin of the young goats. Then she gave Jacob the delicious meal, including freshly baked bread. So Jacob took the food to his father. "My father," he said. "Yes, my son," Isaac answered. "Who are you, Esau or Jacob?" Jacob replied, "It's Esau, your firstborn son. I've done as you told me. Here is the wild game. Now sit up and eat it so that you can give me your blessing." Isaac asked, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" "The Lord your God put it in my path," Jacob replied.
All right. The Olins.
Then Isaac said to Jacob, "Come closer so I can touch you and make sure that you really are Esau." So Jacob went closer to his father, and Isaac touched him. "The voice is Jacob's, but the hands are Esau's," Isaac said. But he did not recognize Jacob, because Jacob's hands felt hairy just like Esau's. So Isaac prepared to bless Jacob. But are you really my son Esau?" he asked. "Yes, I am," Jacob replied. Then Esau said, "Now, my son, bring me the wild game. Let me eat it, and then I will give you my blessing." So Jacob took the food to his father, and Isaac ate it. He also drank the wine that Jacob served him.
Then his father Isaac said to him, "Come near now and kiss me, my son." And he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his clothing and blessed him and said, "Surely the smell of my son is like the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed. Therefore, may God give you of the dew of heaven and of the fatness of the earth and the plenty of grain and wine. Let people serve you and nations bow down to you. Be master over your brethren, and let your mother's sons bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be those who bless you." Now it happened as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and Jacob had scarcely gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came in from his hunting.
All right, Sherry.
Esau prepared a delicious meal and brought it to his father. Then he said, "Sit up, my father, and eat my wild game so you can give me your blessing." But Isaac asked him, "Who are you?" Esau replied, "It's your son, your firstborn son, Esau." Isaac began to tremble uncontrollably and said, "Then who just served me wild game? I have already eaten it, and I blessed him just before you came. And yes, that blessing must stand." When Esau heard his father's words, he let out a loud and bitter cry. "Oh, my father, what about me? Bless me too," he begged. But Isaac said, "Your brother was here and he tricked me. He has taken away your blessing."
All right, Glad.
Esau said, "Jacob is the right name for him. He has tricked me these 2 times. He took away my share of everything you own, and now he has taken away my blessing." Then Esau asked, "Haven't you saved the blessing for me?" Isaac answered, "I gave Jacob the power to be master over you, and all his brothers will be his servants, and I kept him strong with grain and new wine. There is nothing left to give you, my son." But Esau continued, "Do you have only one blessing, father? Bless me too, father." Then Esau began to cry out loud. Isaac said to him, "You will live far away from the best land, far from the rain. You will live by using your sword, and you will be a slave to your brother. But when you struggle, you will break free from him."
All right, Ellen, do you want to read? Just want to give you an opportunity. If you don't, that's fine too. Okay. We're back to you, Don. Just finish it up. You and Elaine can actually take 3 verses each and then just finish up the chapter.
Okay, that would be 41.
Yes, please.
Okay. From that time on, Esau hated Jacob because their father had given Jacob the blessing. And Esau began to scheme, "I will soon be mourning my father's death. Then I will kill my brother Jacob." But Rebekah heard about Esau's plan, so she sent for Jacob and told him, "Listen, Esau is consoling himself by plotting to kill you. So listen carefully, my son. Get ready and flee to my brother Laban in Haran.
Stay there with him until your brother cools off. When he calms down and forgets what you have done to him, I will send for you to come back. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" Then Rebekah said to Isaac, "I'm sick and tired of these local Hittite women. I would rather die than see Jacob marry one of them."
All right. Anything stand out in this chapter?
No, it's a pretty boring verses. What's going on here?
Pretty boring story.
It's interesting that Jacob had 4 opportunities to tell the truth. I was counting these as we were reading, and I'm thinking, wow, he had time. He was asked 4 times who he was, and he had all those chances, and he blew each one of them.
Yeah, when we start asking questions like, what was his motivation, or what was his mom's motivation? One of the things that come to my mind is obviously they want all the riches of Isaac. They want all the riches of Isaac to go to him. What's interesting is he never got any of it. He had to start from scratch because he never saw his mom again, never saw his dad again. All of Jacob's riches he got while being not really a slave, but while working for his uncle Laban. And again, that shows you that, God was going to bless him, but what he really, really wanted God was willing to give to him, but in their minds, we have to cheat our father to get the blessing. And the sad part is, I think that again is a lesson for us because we want stuff. You know, many times it's stuff that God already promises us. And so when the opportunity comes, we would rather give up our dignity. We would give up time. We would give up our resources. We would give up sometimes even our morality, to get what really is the biggest desire of our hearts. And the sad part is, whatever it is we're going for, we probably never get. Just like Jacob never got whatever blessing he had in mind because God had such a much bigger blessing for him. And it's tough because, the person who was most probably, we can make the argument that the person who was most important to him, his mom, the one who favored him, he never got to see. He never got to bury parents. And I think for a child who loved his parents, that's a pretty tough pill to swallow.
Mhm. Well, what do you think was Rebecca's motive? Was she just trying to help fulfill God's prophecy, or is it just because she favored Jacob? I'm trying to figure out what was her motivation, to do this
Yeah,
elaborate deception.
I think it's because he favored Jacob. I think in her mind, Jacob deserved it more than Esau did.
Mm.
Or I know you brought up the point yesterday that Jacob was probably a better leader. And maybe Rebecca saw that. It's like, why would you bless this, bumbling giant? Why this total idiot of my son? Why would the blessing go to him? We've got to manipulate the situation to go the other way.
Let's remember Esau. Remember when he traded his birthright, he didn't really care if he was the
Right,
firstborn.
no.
And so I'm sure Rebecca was like, well, if you don't care about it, then let me have Jake. I mean, they're twins, so it's only a matter of minutes. He's older.
I've always been curious, when we get to heaven, will there be an alternative story? Like, okay, what would have happened if they would have trusted God?
I think so.
How would Jacob ended up, being ahead of his older brother? How would God have done it? That'd be interesting. There's a lot of stories in the Bible like that, but you just kind of wonder how God would have done it.
Right. And I think just like Bible characters, when we get to heaven, and I'd like to say when, because I do believe we will be there. When we get to heaven, our biggest regret is that we didn't stick to God's will.
Yeah.
That somehow we decided, I gotta have this, and we give up our faith in God. Right now I'm working on Hebrews 11, I think 1-3, or either Hebrews 13. I got to figure it out. It's a faith. And it seems to me the Old Testament faith is the most important thing. And, when you look at even humanity, on how we like to manipulate things, and especially when you have power, that's probably your biggest temptation. When you can manipulate the situation to favor you. And the sad part is when people actually put God's name in the whole thing. It's interesting how Jacob put God's name in this. Did you guys catch that?
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
What verse was that approximately?
Verse 20.
20.
Isaac was just stunned. How'd you get this so fast?
Yeah. The
And
Lord
he goes,
God put it in my path.
right.
Well, I know in the discussion with Dr. Pauline, they actually brought the fact that because Jacob said, your God, he actually wasn't fully sold on God being his own God. I think he actually changed his mind after he had that struggle with the angel and he asked him to bless him. So at this point, I think he was kind of like, okay, I want your blessing, and sure, you say that's your God, but I don't think he claimed God as his God yet at that point.
Yeah.
Well, I know that was my experience. I mean, not that I didn't ever not love God in that, but I don't think it ever became, Jesus never didn't become personal till I was almost 25, 24. And, I've told the story. I mean, I'd be teaching the adult class and wondering, I don't know if I believe this. I don't know if it wasn't personal to me till I was older. So I could very well be just like Jacob. It wasn't until he got a little older, like you said, I think that struggle with the angel, but I also think that night out on the open wilderness, when he had that vision or that dream, I think that's where it started to become real, because he realized what he had done wrong. But which obviously we'll get into that later. But I think we all kind of come to that age where it's no longer my parents or my mom or whatever God, it's my God.
Right. No, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's part of the process where God is like the Adventist God.
Right.
And sometimes you hear people when they talk about it, it's not personal. It's not a personal God to them. It's just something that the church does, or it's a plan that the church has. But when we get to a point where we mature, all of a sudden the plan is not just for a church. It's not just for even other people. It's our plan. It's God's personal plan for us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what happened with Jacob. He thought that's why he needed to manipulate it, because obviously it was his dad's plan. And I think when we get to a point where we realize that if God planned something, even we can't screw it up. The one we can't screw God's plan up, but we can screw ourselves up. That's where I think the biggest problem is, and our biggest regret when we get to heaven. When we look at this story, when Esau finally hears it, I feel for him. He lets out this really bitter and loud cry. This wasn't a sniffle. This was a man's man. I think the author wanted to let us know, no, this hurt Esau deep.
Yeah.
And when I think about it, I'm kind of wondering why. Esau doesn't seem to be the kind of person who believed in God. So why do you think he would cry? I mean, if somebody doesn't believe in God and all of a sudden, somebody says, I guess God won't bless you. I know most of my friends who don't believe in God would be like, who cares? They just probably start laughing. I know there are some friends of mine who, if they tell me something that's really, that's bothering them, I offer as is, hey, I just want to let you know I'm going to pray for you. And I know my secular friends would be like, first of all, there'd be this stunned silence. I'd be like, never saw that one coming. Then they would be like, okay, whatever works, I guess. It's kind of like that mentality. But for Esau, something happened here. And does anybody have a guess? And it would be a guess. We really don't know how somebody who is agnostic at best and almost atheistic at worst would actually take this really seriously.
I think it was because his brother lied to him, and his mother, between his brother and his mother, they stole what was basically his right. I mean, How would you feel if your mom stole something from you or lied, had your brother lied to your face or to your father and then he dies? I think I don't know how I'd handle it, but I'd be very bitter and hurt if my brother
Right.
did that to me.
Right.
But
You want to say something, Sherry?
Yeah, it's like he may not have believed in God, but his father really loved him. They were close. It seemed like he was the favorite. So having his father's blessing, whether he believed in God or not, having his father give a blessing probably did mean something to him.
Yeah.
I would,
Yeah,
I
that's
would
a good
agree
point.
with that too.
I'm
That,
sorry.
I would agree with that too. There's a relationship there between father and son. And then whether it's God's blessing, it's probably God's blessing, but then the blessing of all of the inheritance that Isaac would promise him that he's lost. So
Well, and
Right.
Isaac set it up. Isaac said, son, obviously his favorite son, I'm going to
sure,
die soon. And
yeah,
I want to make sure I give you my blessing. I mean, to me, if my dad said that to me, my heart would be like, oh, yeah, because like Sherry said, there is that relationship between Isaac and Esau.
sure,
So you're going out there, you're going to find the best hunt that you can find for your dad because I'm doing it for my dad. And you're also looking forward to this blessing that my favorite guy in the world is going to give me. I don't think it was so much about the leadership of the family or the spiritual part of it. And I'm sure a lot of it probably had to do with the wealth that he knew he was going to get. But
sure.
it was a setup for him to come back to such a disappointment. He was anticipating this hunting. All the while he's hunting, he's probably thinking about it, and to come back, I'd be wailing too.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And I think what that shows us is the power of a blessing, especially from a father. And what's interesting was Jacob knew that because he deceived, there was at least a little chance that a curse would come to him. And Rebecca was the one who said, hey, leave that up to me. Let all the curse come to me. Which again showed me how little they knew about what a blessing and curse. Because that blessing and curse came from God. Sure, it was Isaac who was saying it. And so if God is the one giving the blessing or the curse, it is not up to us to say, well, I'll take it. It'll be my fault. And when Jesus was about to die on the cross, Pilate was basically said, how can I crucify an innocent man? And the priest said, let that curse fall on us. Mm-hmm. We'll handle the curse of it. And they also didn't understand. I mean, these priests knew the Bible left, from beginning to end. They understood what happened to Rebecca. She did get the curse, and we can only guess what that curse is, but I'm sure, there was a lot of weeping and wailing between Jacob and Rebecca that was probably a whole lot more than the weeping and wailing that Esau did. And the curse for them, again, when we get to heaven, we'll only know how far that curse has gone. But for anyone to say, yeah, I'll take that curse, usually they say it flippantly, only number one, because they don't know God. They really don't, or they don't understand what the blessing or the curse is.
But I think as a mother, I think Rebecca did have a curse because she lost both her sons that day. because I'm sure that Esau found out one way or the other that Rebecca was part of the plan.
Right.
So she lost her youngest son and her oldest son that day because of it. So I have a feeling that was probably a curse enough for her.
Well, that would make sense because in the Bible verse, it says, should I lose both sons today, you need to leave.
Yeah.
So both aren't dead. But in Rebecca's, I just want to say in Rebecca's defense, you know, I keep thinking back to the verse where the angel told her that Jacob would be above Esau, would lead Esau.
Rule over.
So there might be a part of her. I can think of times, you know, that you as a mother, you're trying to help your husband when he's trying to do something and you feel strongly, look, this is what God told me. Remember this, remember this. And she's going over and over to him to do that, but he's just dead set. He's going to give this blessing to Esau, even though she strongly believes God wants it to go to Jacob. That maybe it wasn't so much she was just wanting her way, but she was trying to keep Jacob from doing something that, or Isaac from doing something she really believed was against what God had told them both through her dream.
Right. Well, what would have been the correct action? Obviously, she did not. What would have been the correct action from her?
Right.
You know, because there's a line to be crossed. But what would be the one where, all right, you're passionate and you're right, but what would be the right way to do the right thing at this point?
Well, I don't understand why she didn't talk to Isaac. I mean,
Right.
talk about things, you know.
Right.
You know, she could have reminded Isaac, hey, remember the angel told us that you know Jacob would rule over his older brother. So yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's where I would go. And then after you talk, kind of like Pilate's mother-in-law, wasn't it? He just came up and says, don't do this.
Right.
You know, but obviously Pilate didn't listen either. And many times that's all you can do to people who are heading down what you know is a path to hell almost. All you can do is say, I'm begging you, don't do this. And then just kind of leave it up to them. And I would add though that I'm sure the meals between Isaac and Rebecca were very awkward for a long time. I don't know. She might have lost her husband too, in a sense.
That's
that
true.
somehow whatever love they had for each other was strained for a while at the very least.
Yeah.
Because of this. Why do you think Isaac couldn't say, oh, my bad, I was tricked. Let me give you the blessing.
I think back in those days when you said something, your word was like a contract. You couldn't back out of it once he said it.
That's what I
Right.
do.
It's absolutely right. And we can only wish that was the same thing today. You know, I think lawyers would be totally out of a job if that was if that was the thing today.
But you really got to feel for Esau. I mean, he's probably crying. Don't you have one blessing?
I don't know.
Something for me? I mean,
Right.
I feel bad for the guy.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And obviously in Rebecca's mind, she thought, all right, time will heal all wounds. Eventually Esau will forget and calm down. And I don't know if Esau calmed down but we know he didn't forget.
Mm-hmm.
And I know for me, I wish sometimes life had a reset button where you're like, can I have the last 2 days back, you know, or can I please just have because I want to reset it because I know I totally screwed up. And unfortunately, there is no such thing. And
So, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Well, In verse 40, then, when Isaac does talk to Esau, he says, you will live by your sword and you will serve your brother. But when you decide to break free, you will shake his yoke from your neck. So does that mean when you're able to forgive your brother, then you'll be free from it?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Because it seems to me, and I'm glad you caught that. It seems to me that God also had a plan for Esau. And yeah, I think glad you just brought, I don't know if you guys heard it, that eventually Esau did forgive Jacob.
Right.
Although I think that was a Holy Spirit thing, because he was going to kill him. That was what he was planning to do. And for whatever reason, the plan just kind of fell apart and they all hugged each other. And I don't know if they lived happily ever after at the end.
Well, didn't God speak to Esau that night?
That's a good one. I don't know. He might
I'm
have.
thinking that
I don't
that
remember.
in a dream that he was told, don't touch Jacob or don't.
Huh.
I'm not
Could
sure
very well
if
be.
he would, I guess, but I thought I remembered that, but I don't know.
Yeah,
What-
well,
what-
I'm not going to even go ahead. I'm going to wait until we get there. But
There you go.
yeah, it could have very well been.
Well, what happened to Rebecca?
I'm guessing she just died. We don't really know. This is the last time we hear about her. Alive, anyway.
Hmm. So she probably ended up dying alone.
Yeah, it would have been a horrible death, I think, in a sense. Because, the one thing that's hard to get rid of is guilt. It's really hard to get rid of the burden of you did something that you really didn't need to do. And it not just ruined your life, it ruined the life of people you love. That's a tough burden to carry.
I'm ever the optimist, so I believe that maybe Isaac forgave her and that they lived not happily ever after, but at least maybe peaceably a little bit. I don't know.
Right. All right, anything else? Okay. I'm gonna press stop. Thank you for joining us at our prayer and Bible study session as we journey through the Bible one chapter at a time. We realize that you might have some questions or comments on the things that we discussed today. And if you do, please feel free to fill out the form below. Also, if you would like to have your own Bible, please fill out the form below and we will get back to you as soon as we possibly can. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you next time at our prayer and Bible study session.